Imagine a sunset that never ended. The sky would remain painted in gold and crimson forever. At first, it might seem breathtaking, but over time, it would lose the very magic that makes you stop and stare. Now imagine a flower that never withered. If it never faded, would you still treasure its bloom? Or would it quietly become part of the background? What moves the heart is not permanence. It is the fleeting nature of the moment. Buddhist wisdom teaches that beauty is inseparable from impermanence. A moment touches us precisely because it cannot be held. Yet when change enters our lives in ways we did not choose, we resist it. We call it loss. We call it instability. We call it fear. But what if the very thing you fear is what makes life meaningful? The modern world moves quickly. Careers evolve, technology shifts, relationships transform, and entire industries change in a matter of years. In such an environment, the instinct to seek stability feels natural. We hold tightly to familiar identities, a job title, a role in a relationship, a version of ourselves that once felt secure. When these begin to shift, anxiety follows. Burnout often arises not only from workload, but from trying to freeze a moving world. The tighter the grip, the more tension the mind creates. Buddhist teachings describe this suffering as a misunderstanding of impermanence, anicca. Change is not a disruption of life's order, it is life's order. Fear of change grows when we believe that stability should be permanent. We assume that what feels comfortable now must remain unchanged to protect our happiness. But impermanence does not ask for permission. It unfolds whether we resist or allow. Anxiety, in this sense, is resistance to the natural flow of reality. The mind tries to anchor itself in something solid, even though everything is already moving. The problem is not change itself. It is the effort to control what cannot be fixed. When we recognize the tight grip for what it is, a protective instinct rather than a solution, something begins to soften. We start to see that the tension does not come from the river's movement, but from trying to stop the river with our hands. Watch a single leaf in autumn. It does not resist the wind. It does not cling to the branch out of fear of the ground. When its time comes, it falls, not as a tragedy, but as part of a larger rhythm. Buddhist wisdom calls this rhythm anicca, impermanence. Change is not a temporary disruption of peace. It is the rule by which all things exist. The river flows around stones without losing its nature. The sunset fades without losing its beauty. The seasons shift without asking permission. Nothing in nature apologizes for changing. Yet the human mind often sees change as a mistake, as something that should not be happening. We treat it as an interruption of stability rather than the foundation of life itself. When we see change as an interruption, we suffer. When we see it as a pattern, something softens. Beauty exists because moments cannot be frozen. If the river stopped moving, it would stagnate. If the sun refused to set, night would never reveal the stars. If youth never shifted into maturity, growth would never unfold. Impermanence does not diminish meaning, it creates it. The turning point comes when we realize that peace does not come from freezing life in place. It comes from flowing with it. Flowing does not mean passivity, it means aligning with reality instead of fighting it. It means recognizing that resistance does not stop the wind. It only exhausts the branch. Just as the leaf trusts the wind, the mind can learn to trust the unfolding of change. Not because it knows where it will land, but because it understands that falling is part of becoming. And in that trust, fear slowly transforms, not into certainty, but into a quieter presence that allows each moment to rise and fall naturally. At the center of the fear of change is often a deeper fear, the fear of losing who we believe ourselves to be. The ego quietly builds a fixed identity. I am this kind of person. I have this role. My life should look this way. These identities feel solid and protective. They offer a sense of continuity in a world that constantly shifts. They create the comforting illusion that something inside us is permanent and unchanging. But life does not remain still. Careers evolve, relationships shift, beliefs mature. Even the body transforms without asking permission. When change threatens these identities, fear arises. It can feel as if something essential is being taken away, as though the ground beneath the self is dissolving. Buddhist teaching gently introduces the idea of sunyata, often translated as emptiness. This does not mean nothingness or loss of meaning. It means that what we call self is not fixed or independent. It is a living process, constantly forming and reforming in response to conditions. The person you were 5 years ago has already changed. The dreams, preferences, and fears that once defined you are not identical today. Yet awareness, the simple fact of being conscious, has remained steady through every transformation. Behind the identity you try to protect is not a permanent structure, but a dynamic unfolding. The core insight is simple but liberating. You are not the fixed version you're trying to defend. When the illusion of a rigid self softens, change becomes less threatening. There is nothing solid to lose, only movement from one form into another. The ego fears dissolution because it equates change with disappearance. But awareness does not disappear. It witnesses the transformation. And when identity is seen as fluid rather than fixed, the anxiety around change begins to loosen, creating space for growth, curiosity, and a freedom that was always quietly present. Understanding impermanence intellectually is one thing. Feeling it in the body is another. Letting go does not begin with philosophy. It begins with awareness. When change enters your life, a shift in career, a relationship ending, an uncertain future, the first reaction is often mental. The mind searches for explanations, solutions, or someone to blame. But before the story forms, something else happens. Pause. Notice what is happening in the body. Perhaps there is tightness in the chest, a heaviness in the stomach, a subtle rush of heat, restlessness, or shallow breathing. This is the raw experience of change before interpretation. Instead of immediately building a narrative, this shouldn't be happening, or I'm losing everything. Try something different. Allow the sensation to exist without adding meaning. This is the practice focus. Allow sensation, release, story. Fear feels overwhelming not because of the sensation itself, but because the mind rushes to predict outcomes and defend identity. It projects into the future, searching for stability. Yet beneath the story is simply energy, movement in the body asking to be felt. When you sit quietly with the sensation, without resisting or dramatizing it, something subtle shifts. The experience becomes less threatening. It transforms from catastrophe into sensation. Buddhist practice encourages what is called beginner's mind during transitions. Beginner's mind does not assume it already knows what change means. It does not immediately label something as disaster or failure. It approaches uncertainty with curiosity. Instead of asking, "How do I stop this?" ask gently, "What is this moment showing me?" Letting go does not mean approving of every change. It does not require liking what is happening. It simply means ending the internal war against reality. Each time you notice yourself tightening, soften the breath. Feel your feet touching the ground. Notice the air entering and leaving the body. The mind may still whisper fears, but awareness becomes wider than the fear. Over time, letting go becomes less dramatic and more natural. It is not one grand surrender. It is a series of small releases, breath by breath, moment by moment. In those small releases, the grip loosens, and what once felt like loss may begin to reveal itself as space. Space for growth, renewal, and directions you could not have imagined while holding on so tightly. Letting go is not falling apart. It is learning to move with the current rather than exhausting yourself fighting it. When resistance softens, life no longer feels like a series of endings. It feels like an unfolding. A river does not mourn the shape it held yesterday. It moves forward, constantly reshaping itself while remaining water at its core. In the same way, identity is not a fixed structure. It is a flowing process. The version of you that existed years ago has already dissolved into the present. Yet something steady remains, awareness itself. Buddhist wisdom teaches that surrender is not defeat. It is alignment with reality. Trying to stop change is like trying to hold back waves with your hands. But learning to surf them, adjusting balance, trusting movement, transforms fear into flow. Impermanence does not remove stability. It reveals a deeper kind of stability, the stability of presence. When you stop demanding that life remain the same, you become lighter. Each shift becomes part of the journey rather than an interruption of it. The infinite stream of change carries both gain and loss, beginnings and endings. But awareness moves through them all without being destroyed. And in that realization, freedom appears. Not the freedom of controlling the waves, but the freedom of moving with them with openness, courage, and quiet grace. Change is not a punishment, it is movement. When we resist it, fear feels sharp and personal, as if life itself is working against us. But when we begin to see change as part of a larger flow, something softens. The wave does not rise to destroy the shore. It rises because that is its nature. In the same way, life moves because it is alive. Today, notice one small change, a shift in mood, a transition in your routine, even the fading of daylight. Instead of resisting it, simply observe it. If this reflection resonated with you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like calm guidance through uncertainty, you are warmly invited to subscribe and continue this journey. The wave was never against you. It was always carrying you forward.